working hard and striving to please God and striving to work in the lives of others as well. And if you're working, you're going to mess stuff up every now and then. I always say at work when I'm talking to my guys, the guys that work under me, they'll break something and come to me and, hey, I broke this, and hey, if you're not breaking something, you're not working. So if we're not causing some trouble every now and then, we're not sticking our foot in our mouth, we're not busy doing something. So let's make sure that we're busy doing stuff, but we got to be careful and allow everything to be seasoned with salt, and that we hold our tongue. But Peter and James and John here, we see that they were wanting to call fire down from heaven on the Samaritans for not receiving Jesus. And Jesus, he turned and he rebuked them, and he said, you know not what manner of spirit ye are of. We can be certain that God will tend to the judgment of men. So we don't need to get involved in the judgment of men. We let God sort that out. We let him handle that. Additionally, James, he accused many Christians of asking amiss. When we look at James chapter 4, verse 3, asking amiss that they may consume it upon their own lust. God is not a genie on a string that's there to answer our every whim and our every desire. So we see that it's possible to pray in a manner that's not pleasing to God. We see that it's possible to pray wrongly. I don't know if you've thought about that. I hadn't until I kind of came across this thought. I had never really thought about, that we could pray wrongly, and we got to be careful there. And so those are just a couple little areas that we could pray wrongly. But I have a specific something tonight in mind concerning praying wrongly. And I'm talking about prayers that would prevent you and I, if they were granted, from being pleasing to God and from growing in our faith. Remember Hebrews 11:6. What is it, Hebrews 11:6? It says, without faith, it's what? Impossible to please him, to please God. And so without faith, we can't please God. And no matter how you choose to define faith, one word pretty much sums it up, and that's trust. There's a whole lot of ways we can go a little deeper into that definition, but faith is a perceptible trust in God. When we have faith in God, we have trust in God. We have trust in the finished work of Christ on the cross of Calvary. We have trust in what God has planned for our lives. Now, is it not true that oftentimes when we find ourselves in a situation that requires some faith, we immediately pray for God to remove or change it? I believe that's true in my life. Now, does that make any sense to us? No. I must have faith in order to please God. We see that without faith, it's impossible to please God. But then whenever an opportunity comes for us to grow and increase in faith, we ask for God to take that opportunity away from us. It's contradictory to what God would desire for us to do. And so we must have faith in order to please God, but every time we have that situation that comes up, we ask for God to take it away. We have financial difficulties that will come our way, and we quickly remind God what a faithful tither we are, and we bring up every Bible passage that seems to promise bountiful blessings to us. Lord, I call upon you to grant me that abundant life that Jesus promised us over in Luke 6:38. And we say that because I'm a giver, that it shall be given unto me. And so in other words, we say, Lord, I don't want to have trust in you for any length of time concerning my financial status. And we ask for God to remove that financial hardship immediately and ask God to send a windfall of money to get us out of that debt or whatever the case is. Or maybe our health or the health of our loved one deteriorates. And we find ourselves praying that by his stripes we're supposed to be healed. And we pretend like God owes us good health. And we think that God owes us something. Let me tell you, friends, God don't owe us anything. We owe all of ourselves to him. He doesn't owe us a thing. And so, in other words, we say, Lord, I don't want to have trust that you are aware of my sickness and believe that against all the reports and the pain in my life and the future is in your hands. We say, Lord, heal me now. I don't want to wait till later. And so we ask for God to take away that opportunity for us to build that faith in him. We may have a spiritual or a mental crisis. We would say, I'm not supposed to feel depressed or abandoned or forsaken or unimportant. I am, after all, a child of the King. I have no business as such being led by the Spirit into a barren wilderness. You ever felt like you was in a wilderness? And if we could be honest, we all may have faced some times in our life where spiritually or mentally we're in a tough spot. We're in a barren wilderness and we're looking to get out. And immediately we ask God, say, Lord, just get me out of this. Take me away from this place. And in other words, we would say, Lord, you should be perfectly happy that I am where I am spiritually, and you shouldn't direct or even ask me to grow in my trust. Take this wilderness away from me. And on the list goes. We could continue going on. But when the tribulation that Jesus promised his disciples actually comes our way, immediately we ask, we beg, or even demand that God would take that away. And we know that the tribulation is coming. He's told us that it would come. And so look at James chapter 1 with me. James chapter 1. Go ahead and turn there, and we'll look at what James has to say about temptations and what we ought to let it do in our lives. These temptations and these trials. In James chapter 1, verse 2, notice what James says. He says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations." And these divers temptations, that's various trials. That's different types of difficulties. It's not only temptations to sin, but it's trials and sorrows and heartaches that we have in life. And James is saying, "My brethren, count it all joy." Now, I don't really like being in trials. I don't really like having the difficulties of life. I like things to be easy. I like things to go real smooth and real easy. But James is telling us to be joyful in that time. And that's difficult. He says, "Knowing this, that the trying of your faith, it worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. And if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him." And so, friends, we need to understand that these trials, these temptations, and these sorrows, oftentimes they're here for our benefit. They're not here to cause us harm. They're not here to drive us away from God. The trials and the hard times of life are here to draw us to God. They're here to strengthen us. They're here to increase our faith. And so just a couple truths that we need to remind ourselves when trials come. First thing, trials are to bring joy, not panic. How often are we guilty of whenever a trial comes, we panic? Oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to pay that bill, or oh my goodness, our health is deteriorating, or oh my goodness, I'm in this time of mental or spiritual barrenness, or whatever the case is, and the list goes on. But yet we need to understand that it's meant to bring us joy and not panic. Again, what we need is wisdom in our trial and not its removal necessarily. And so remember what James said, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith, it worketh out patience." Secondly, it's the activity of the testing of our faith that grows and increases faith. If we want our faith to grow, it's got to be tested. And so if it's not being tested, it's not going to grow. We need to realize that when we rush to God in prayer to be delivered of our trial, that we are in essence asking Him to make sure that our spiritual roots don't go down very deep. You know how a tree can grow deep roots whenever there's a little bit of a lack of water, and it has to go deep, deep, deep to try to find the nourishment and find the water. And whenever the water is always on the surface, it doesn't have to go down deep to get that nourishment. However, with our faith, it's the same way. If it's never tested, then our roots never have to go deep. Just as the physical body needs consistent stretching and straining and exercise to increase in strength, our spiritual man is much the same. If it didn't take all this stretching and exercise, that all is the same reason as to why that I'm not a mountain of muscle looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger up here. I sure wish I was. I wish I had those muscles. But you know what it takes? It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of pain. It takes a lot of stretching. It takes a lot of endurance. And honestly, I'm not willing to do it, or else I would look like him. And so what we have to realize is that if we want our faith to be strong, then we have to be willing to get out of our comfort zone. We have to be willing to be stretched a little. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable to let our faith be strengthened. It's those trials that we endure in our life that increase and grows and furthers our faith. Thirdly, the purpose of the trial is ultimately that you may be perfect and complete. You see, Christ doesn't want us to be lazy. He doesn't want us to be comfortable. He wants us to be holy. God wants us to be holy and more like Jesus. He wants us to be complete and not comfortable. And I believe that we could all agree that we're way too comfortable in so many areas, especially in the church house. We come and we sit on the comfortable pews, and I know, oftentimes if the air conditioning's out, we contemplate maybe canceling a service or something. Lord forbid that we would ever get so comfortable in here that we can't stand a little bit of uncomfortableness. That whenever the Holy Spirit would lean on us and would push us and give us the unction to go share the gospel with somebody, that we wouldn't stay in our comfort zone and say, that's too uncomfortable, I'm not going to do that. Lord forbid that we would sit here in our padded pews with the AC running and then not go tell somebody about a Savior who can save their souls and their need for a Savior. And so we have to understand that God doesn't want us to be comfortable. He wants us to be holy. Fourth, if you really want to pray a meaningful prayer when trouble comes, let it be a request for understanding and a request for faith. When trials come our way, the thing that we need most may be a word from God about what He wants us to gain from it, not an answer to when we shall be delivered or an explanation of why He allowed it. It's okay to maybe ask why. It's okay to say, Lord, I don't quite understand why I'm going through this. But at the same breath, we need to say, Lord, I don't understand. Help me to understand. Increase my faith, increase my understanding, and help me to trust you in this time of need. If my grace is sufficient for you, it was all that the Apostle Paul got when praying for his thorn of the flesh to be removed, then why isn't that sufficient for me and you? And so sometimes we need to understand that just God's grace is sufficient. Maybe we're not going to get out of this trial for quite a few years, or maybe ever. Paul, I don't know what that thorn was in his flesh, but he besought the Lord 3 times to take it away. And then finally God answered. He said, I'm not gonna. He said, my grace is sufficient. And so there may be something in you for the rest of your life. Maybe it's health, maybe it's mental, maybe it's financial, or whatever the case is. You may just go from paycheck to paycheck the rest of your life, being obedient to God, doing exactly what God has called you to do. And He may just say, my grace is sufficient for you. And we have to accept that. And friends, I hope that we would. I hope that we would say, you know what? His grace is sufficient. That's all I need. It's more than enough. And so here's a couple questions that I believe that we need to learn to ask ourselves at the onset and in the midst of trials. And this first one, I want to be careful here. I want you to listen. Is this trial the result of my own actions? Am I in this mess of my own accord? And what do I need to learn from it? Now, there's people that would make the statement maybe that you're sick because of your sin, and that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying here is sometimes maybe we get ourselves in a financial problem, and that's exactly it. We got ourselves there. And maybe we would ask for God to take it away, but God's just saying, you got yourself there. You're in a mess because you did it. Maybe, we're in a health problem. I had an uncle who died from liver disease. He drank himself to death. He did that. God didn't give him liver disease. He drank hard liquor for his whole life, and he died because of it. And so even though we prayed that he would be healed, and we prayed for understanding, God, said, you know what, you got to increase your faith, and He put Himself there in that position. And so, we have to ask ourselves, is this trial the result of my own accord? Did I get myself here? And then God is not obligated to get us out of our mess. God isn't obligated to do anything. And so we have to understand that. And so that's a question we could ask ourselves. But I wanted to be careful there because there are people that would, just like with Job. Remember with Job, his friends asked him, well, you're sick. They said, you're sick and all this happened because of your sin. Trials and difficulties are not always a result of sin. Sometimes they are. And we have to understand that. Sometimes that's chastisement of God. But sometimes it's just life. And we live in a fallen, sick, sin-filled world that we live in today that's wicked. And there's trials and troubles on every corner. And sometimes life is just messy. I know in my life, hey, there's messy things that we face. There's messy things at work. There's messy things in relationships and all of these things. And sometimes it's just life. But we can ask that question, is this a result of my own actions? Am I in this mess of my own accord? The second question we can ask is, who is this trial for? And I try to remind myself to ask this oftentimes. Who is this trial for? Who may I know now or in the future that this trial I'm in right now can help, can be a blessing? That God will see me through this and may not have a full healing or may not have the financial windfall or whatever the case is, but God walked through this with me. And then I can go and I can walk through that trial with someone else. So who is this trial for? Why am I in the midst of this? Many people are helped by those who have gone through the same trials. Isn't it a blessing whenever you're going through something and somebody can come up and wrap their arms around you and say, hey, I've been there. I know what you're going through. And it's kind of frustrating when somebody say, I know how you feel, but they don't have a clue. And they mean well, and we mean well. We say that sometimes, but let's be careful not to say that if we really don't. But it is a blessing whenever you're going through something and somebody says, hey, I've been there. And this is how God saw me through it. God walked with me every step of the way. And so maybe He won't deliver us through it, but I can tell you, God will never leave us nor forsake us. And we can rest in that. We can rest assured that He will be there in the trial, and He will help our faith to grow. And then the third question is, in what ways can I grow in this trial? In what ways does God want me to grow through the midst of this trial? And number 4, how can I exhibit faith and glorify God in this trial? The world around us is always watching us. If you work, if you have a job and you're out working, you go through a difficult time. And those who know that you're a Christian, they're watching you. They're watching you like a hawk. They want to see how you're handling that situation. Because oftentimes they're sitting there thinking like he's going to fail. he's going to fall, he's going to curse God. And so we have to make sure that in the midst of that trial that people are watching us, and who is going to see us walk through that with faith, and then it can increase their faith as well. They're certainly watching when we enter into the trials of life to see that faith that we talk about so much, and to see if it's actually real. And so we need to make sure that they see a real faith. And so I'm sure there's much more to faith than human words or reasoning can comprehend, but I'm sure that a simple word to describe faith is trust, okay? And so just simply tonight, I think that captures fully the biblical and the divine intent of faith. And it all really boils down to trust. When something bad happens in our lives, we run to God and we fall on our knees, beseeching Him to intervene, but because we don't trust Him to do anything without our prayers. And that's sometimes that can kind of be how it comes off, is, well, God, if I trusted God, I would already know that Jesus said, I am of far greater value to Him than sparrows, right? And the sparrows, He knows when one single of them falls, and He knows what they have need of. And so in my need, God knows. Now, I don't think there's a thing wrong with us going to God and pouring our hearts out to Him and letting Him know, Lord, I'm hurting. But in the midst of that, in the midst of pouring our heart out to Him, let us not be asking why. Let us not be asking Him immediately to just take it away. And let us ask those questions. Lord, what would you have me to learn? Lord, why am I here? Who can get benefit from this trial in my life? How can I better glorify you in the midst of this trial? Those are the questions and the supplications that we need to be making to God, not asking Him to take it away immediately. Now, you could say, Lord, if it be your will, I'd sure love to be healed. But if not, nevertheless, and we're going to get to that here shortly, but there's a lot of prayers then that are mere ploys to attempt to manipulate God into doing something for us that we really don't think that He would do without our intervention. It's almost like we think, well, He don't know about this unless I go and I tell Him. No, trust me, God knows. He knows what we have need of. It's all fine and good when we get our financial windfall and that we desperately need, or the miraculous healing comes and that we prayed so hard for, or the revival that our souls thirsted for has come. But if you've been around for any length of time, you know that there's often times that those prayers, they seem to go unanswered. And they're not unanswered, I promise you. It's just God says maybe no right now, or wait, or trust me and just see what I'll do later. And we have to understand that sorrows encompass our soul sometimes, and we just want God to take them away. But we have to ask ourselves this question: could I be a faith-filled person if God immediately answered all my prayers? Would our children grow and be strong and be independent and be able to take care of themselves if we wait on them hand and foot? And I can tell you that, and that's an answer is no. Our children would be useless. They wouldn't be able to do anything on their own. And the same way with us. If every time we ask God, take this trial, if He just took it away, then we would be pretty well useless. We'd have no legs to stand on. We'd have no depth in us. We'd have no real faith that would be useful for the Lord. And if truth be told, there's no way that we could be that veteran of faith that we should be if God responded and He put out the flames every single time. The fact is that we need trials. We need to walk in them. We need to walk in them together. You want to see a church family come and draw close together? Walk through some trials together. Go through some difficulties. Temple Baptist Church, we've been through some trials. Y'all have been through some trials, I know, some difficulties. And what does it do? It draws you close together. It draws you and it increases your faith, and it helps you in ways that the answered prayer never could. The most powerful testimonies are often those that express a profound appreciation to God for being with those who endured a long and a painful trial. And so, who would have the most powerful testimonies of God's grace to share if the thorns in our flesh or the thorns in life were just all miraculously removed shortly after our first prayer? Our pastor, Brother Dwayne Hyatt, he lost his left arm in an industrial accident. He got it caught in a screw conveyor. It ripped his left arm off, and that happened in 2011. April 1st, 2011, on April Fool's Day. He lost his arm at work. And he'll tell you now, and I've heard him tell the story so many times, and he would say, Brother Alden, he said, if you told me that you'd give me my arm back right now, he said, I'd be a fool to not take it back. He said, but if you told me that if I took my arm back right now, I would lose all the blessings, I would lose all the things that I've learned, and my faith would be diminished back to where it was before I lost my arm, he said, I'd tell you to keep it. He said, I've grown. God has grown me. God has increased my faith. God has allowed me to see people pour love into my life and to help me and to change my life so much to the better. He said that you'd keep that arm if I got to give all that up. You know, and that's a testimony to God's grace. That's a testimony to the empowering work of God to increase our faith. We have such great testimonies of faith in the Bible. I often think of the faith of those 3 Hebrew children. We think about them all the times in the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and certainly they prayed for God to deliver them from that fire, and they knew that He was able to do it. And though the fire would be hot, they would just keep on trusting God. Notice what they said in Daniel. You know this well. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and He will deliver us out of thine hand, O King. But if not, they said He is able, and we think He will, but if not, be it known unto thee, O King, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. What a great testimony. They said He's able, and I believe He will, but if He don't, He's still God. I'm still going to serve Him. I'm still going to stand up, and I'm still not going to bow to this golden image. What a great example that we have from them. And not only them, we see there was some great faith and some great courage in the midst of that trial. We see Joseph face some horrible events in his life, yet we never see Joseph get bitter at all. We see Joseph sold into slavery by his brothers. We see him thrown in prison for just being lied about. We see him forgotten in prison. We see all kinds of things that went on in his life. And yet he never cursed God. He never got bitter. And at the end of it all, Joseph was able to say, but as for you, you meant it evil against me, but God meant it unto good to bring it to pass as it is this day to save much people alive. Joseph said, hey, I've been through some trials, but my faith has been increased. I've been through some trials, but many people were saved alive because of it. And I believe, certainly Joseph probably asked that God would get him out of prison. But I think that as we look at the life of Joseph, that he also said, but if not, I'll serve you anyway. But if not, God, you're still God. If not, I'm going to trust you here in the pit, here in the prison, here in the palace. I'm just going to trust you. Would you like to know one of the most faith-filled and faith-producing statements in all of the Bible? I think this is so good. It's just one sentence in a song. You know it well. In Psalm 46:10, it says, be still and know that I am God. The very faith-filled portion of Scripture there, I believe, and it'll help us in the midst of the trial. We need to learn to be still. And we need to learn to trust and know that He is God, that He is good, that He is sovereign, that He has a perfect plan. And that He'll work things all together for good to them who love Him and those who are called, what? According to His purpose. He's not going to work it out for good according to our purpose, but according to His. He's going to work things out. God is going to work things out for good so that He can get the glory out of it. And if Him getting the glory means that I got to suffer a little bit, well then, by George, bring on the suffering. And it's easy to say, harder to live out. I would say that, but certainly we've got to be working that we can live that out. He's the God of the universe, and certainly we can trust Him. Brother Richard, I don't know you that well, but if you walked up to me right now and you said, hey, brother, can I see your truck keys? I'd take my keys out and I'd give them right to you. I trust you. What are you going to do? You going to steal my truck? I know you. Your wife's sitting right here. You're not going nowhere with it. I'll give you my keys, no problem. But yet God sometimes will come up and say, hey, I've got a trial for you. Hey, I got a job for you. Hey, I got somebody I want you to witness to. And maybe we say, I don't know about that. Let us just take the keys out of the pocket and say, here you go, God. I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Let's just be obedient to God and trust Him. We have to learn just to simply trust the Lord. Christ set the perfect example with all of His actions in life, but especially we see Him modeling this faith-filled attitude in John chapter 12, verses 27 and 28. He says, now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? He says, but for this cause came I unto this hour. And then His last statement there, He says, Father, glorify thy name. He said, I've come for this hour and it's going to be rough. He says, but Father, glorify thy name. God is not insulted by prayers that ask for the bitter cup to be removed from our presence. But if you want to pray like Jesus, make sure that we add just like Jesus did. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. All for the glory of God. So friends, trials are going to come and we have decisions to make. Are we going to go in prayer immediately and ask God to remove them? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but let there be but nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. Lord, I'd love to see this trial gone, but God, if I need to grow, if I need to be able to help somebody later on, if I need to be able to have my faith increased, then keep that trial here. I'll take it. I want to grow. And it's difficult as it is for me. I don't go and I don't work out to gain muscle because I don't like it. It's uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable to go through trials. But let's be a people that would say, Lord, I'll go through the trial. I'll go through it. I'll ask Miss Chastity to come and just have a moment of invitation here. I'm sorry I kind of spring it on you a little bit. I'm bad about that. But it's all for the glory of God. Jesus came. He said, I came not to do my will, but the will of the Father. And that's exactly us. This is not our home. We sang it tonight. I talked about it this morning. We're just passing through. Let's stand as the invitation is given. And God just desires that we would trust Him. Just simply trust the Lord in the trials and the good times. He is good. He is sovereign. He is a good Father. And we need to just trust Him. Go ahead.